Have you ever noticed how some mysteries never really leave you? They creep into your thoughts late at night, the kind that make you double-check the locks or stare a little too long at a dark corner. Tonight, we're diving into 25 of the most chilling, head-spinning mysteries. Stories that stretch from unsolved crimes and vanishing people to strange legends whispered across centuries. But here's the twist. This isn't just a list. Each story has layers. Some will make you question the limits of human behavior. Others will brush up against the unexplainable. These aren't just cases to read and forget. They're mysteries designed to sit with you, whether you're winding down before bed or keeping yourself sharp during a long stretch of work. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's hiding in the dark. It's realizing how little we actually know. Before we dive in, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button if you enjoy mysteries that make you think twice. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next deep dive. Oh, and if you know a friend who loves spooky or unsolved cases, share this video with them. It's free, and it helps more than you think. 1. The vanishing at Land's End. On the surface, Kurt McFall's life looked like the blueprint for a bright future. Born in 1966, he grew up in California as the kind of student teachers admired. Popular, smart, and full of energy. He was into school clubs, loved science, thrived outdoors, and even had a passion for role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. By the time he was a teenager, he seemed to have everything lined up: friends, hobbies, and ambition. But in September 1984, his story turned sharply darker. Kurt told his family he was going to spend the weekend with a friend in San Francisco. He never came home. 2 days later, hikers found his body at the base of the cliffs at Land's End, half-clothed, battered, and lying in a place no teenager should have been alone at night. His car was discovered abandoned nearby, oddly staged with beer bottles scattered around, despite Kurt not being known as a drinker. The coroner ruled his death inconclusive. Maybe he fell. Maybe he jumped. Maybe someone pushed him. Theories spiraled. Some said it was a tragic accident. Others whispered about satanic cults and occult entanglements, fueled by the panic of the 1980s. What's most unsettling is how the official explanation never quite fit. The body told one story, the car another, and his friends yet another. Kurt's father insisted his son was killed. Investigators shrugged, and nearly 4 decades later, the cliffs still hold their secret. 2. The art heist next door. On paper, Jerry and Rita Alter looked like the definition of ordinary. A retired school teacher and a speech pathologist living in a quiet New Mexico town. They were polite, educated, well-traveled, the kind of couple neighbors would wave to without giving much thought. But when Rita passed away in 2017, a shocking discovery turned their entire legacy upside down. As their belongings were sold off, a dusty old painting was found hidden behind their bedroom door. At first glance, it just looked like an old canvas nobody cared about. But when art experts got a closer look, jaws dropped. This wasn't just any painting. It was Woman Ochre, a Willem de Kooning masterpiece, stolen from the University of Arizona Museum of Art back in 1985. Its value? Around $150 million. The discovery ignited one of the strangest debates in modern art crime. Could this quiet middle-class couple really have pulled off one of the boldest heists in American history? The more investigators dug, the stranger it got. A family photograph showed the Alters in Tucson the very day before the painting was stolen. Old police sketches of the suspects looked eerily similar to Rita. And then there was Jerry's bizarre short story about a grandmother and granddaughter stealing a jewel from a museum. and keeping it hidden just for themselves. Coincidence? Maybe. But it left everyone wondering, were Jerry and Rita secret master thieves, or just accidental keepers of stolen art? 3. Heidi's disappearance. In 2010, a young Belgian mother named Heidi de Schepper vanished without a trace. What makes her case chilling isn't just the disappearance itself, but the way it went unnoticed, not for days or weeks, but for nearly 14 years. Heidi's life had always been turbulent. She had a difficult childhood, spent time in foster care, and eventually moved in with a much older man who had once been her foster parent, a relationship that many described as deeply unsettling. Together, they had 3 children, and by all accounts, Heidi lived a very isolated life. Friends were few, and family ties were nearly non-existent. Then, one day in mid-2010, she was simply gone. Her partner told people she had left after an argument, supposedly because of drug problems. But here's the disturbing part. He never reported her missing. Nobody did. Her name was quietly removed from government records, and for more than a decade, it was as if she had never existed. It wasn't until 2023, when school officials raised questions about her long absence as a parent, that police finally launched a formal investigation. By then, so much time had passed that evidence was practically non-existent. Did Heidi run away to start a new life? Did she overdose, unnoticed? Or was she the victim of foul play at the hands of the man who once had authority over her? The silence around her disappearance may be the loudest clue of all. 4. The river monster of Africa. In the swampy heartlands of Zambia and Angola, people whisper about a creature called the Kongamato, its name roughly meaning breaker of boats. Locals describe it as something between a bird and a reptile. Leathery wings stretching several feet wide, a sharp-toothed beak, and a presence that sends fear rippling through entire villages. The earliest stories come from the Kalua and Bemba peoples, passed down through generations. Hunters claimed it attacked canoes. Fishermen swore it lurked beneath the rivers. What makes the legend so captivating is just how closely the descriptions resemble a pterosaur, the prehistoric flying reptiles thought to have gone extinct millions of years ago. In the 1920s, British explorers heard these tales firsthand. When they showed villagers sketches of dinosaurs from textbooks, the people pointed and said, "That's it. That's the Kongamato." Suddenly the legend wasn't just folklore, it was a possible living fossil. Through the years, stories trickled in. Engineers, travelers, even scientists reported glimpses of strange winged shapes in the sky. But skeptics have their own explanation: massive storks, giant fruit bats, or even misidentified shadows. After all, in the dead of night, when something huge flaps over your head, how certain could you really be of what you saw? Still, the legend refuses to die. Whether real animal or cultural echo, the Kongamato remains one of Africa's most haunting mysteries, a creature that blurs the line between ancient past and modern fear. 5. Mystery in the cliffs. When investigators examined the spot where Kurt McFall's car was abandoned, nothing about it felt ordinary. The vehicle was left parked near a golf course overlooking the ocean. His license lay on the floor, his keys on the seat, as if someone wanted it all to be seen. And then there were the empty beer bottles scattered around, raising eyebrows because Kurt's friends swore he never drank. Adding to the strangeness, his prized suit of medieval armor, something he had purchased for his role-playing group, had vanished from the trunk. Was it stolen? Or taken to make the scene look staged? Some argued it was all a tragic accident, a reckless teenager climbing cliffs in the dark. But Kurt's father never believed it. He said his son was too familiar with the terrain, too cautious to make that mistake. Others suspected foul play, that someone pushed him, or that the occult circles he was exploring had trapped him in something far darker. And yet, another theory is surprisingly mundane. Perhaps opportunists stumbled on Kurt's abandoned car and tampered with it, unknowingly muddying the trail. Maybe the bottles weren't his, but someone else's. Maybe the missing armor was stolen after the fact. The problem is, all these maybes never add up to a clear truth. At Land's End, the details remain just out of reach, like shadows flickering at the edge of a flashlight. 6. The woman in the hotel room. On New Year's Eve 2020, 23-year-old flight attendant Christine Dacara checked into a hotel in Makati, Philippines, with co-workers to celebrate. By morning, she was gone, found lifeless in the bathtub of room 2207. What happened that night sparked one of the most controversial investigations in recent Philippine history. Early reports painted a horrifying picture: bruises, scratches, and signs of possible abuse. Police quickly announced it as a potential assault case, charging the men who had been at the party. Headlines exploded. Social media turned her death into a national spectacle overnight. But then the official autopsy dropped a curveball. The coroner said Christine had died from a ruptured aortic aneurysm, a natural medical condition, not foul play. That didn't explain the injuries, though. Were they incidental, or evidence of something more sinister? Her family refused to believe the natural death explanation, pointing to the marks on her body and the questionable speed at which the case was declared solved. Critics accused police of botching the investigation, embalming her body before key forensic tests, mishandling evidence, and rushing to judgment. Was Christine a victim of medical misfortune or of a cover-up? 3 years later, the questions still sting. Her case remains suspended between two competing narratives, science pointing one way, suspicion pointing the other. Sometimes the truth isn't hidden, it's buried under the noise. 7. Lost among the homeless. Adam Hecht had everything most people dream of. He was young, handsome, and the son of a successful Hollywood film producer. He grew up in privilege, teaching tennis and moving easily through Beverly Hills society. But in 1989, Adam's life veered in a direction no one could have predicted. He befriended a homeless man named Tony, and soon invited him to live in his apartment. Friends and family were stunned. Adam seemed restless with his wealthy upbringing, disillusioned by comfort, and increasingly drawn to meditation and mysticism. He began spending nights on the streets, sitting with homeless communities, trying to understand a life completely unlike his own. Then, on June 7, 1989, Adam drove away in a rental car. He never returned. Weeks later, the car turned up abandoned in Beverly Hills, with his wallet, cash, and credit cards still inside. No signs of struggle, no clear direction, just nothing. Tony claimed he had no idea where Adam had gone, but a cryptic remark he made later only deepened suspicion. Stay on the streets long enough, and you'll find out what happened to Adam. Did Adam choose to vanish, leaving behind wealth for a life of anonymity? Or did he meet foul play in the very world he was trying to understand? Decades later, the mystery lingers, a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger lies in stepping too far outside the life you know. 8. The Buckskin Girl. In April 1981, a group of young men in rural Ohio stumbled upon the body of a young woman lying in a ditch. She wore jeans, a sweater, and a distinctive buckskin poncho with tassels, but she had no shoes, no ID, and no name. For decades, she was known only as the Buckskin Girl. The medical examiner found she had been brutally attacked, blunt force trauma, and strangulation. Yet, oddly, Her teeth were well cared for, her hair neatly braided. She didn't look like someone living on the streets. So who was she? Police plastered her composite sketch across newspapers and TV. Hundreds of tips came in, but none led to an answer. The case went cold, and she was buried as a Jane Doe. Still, investigators preserved her clothing and samples of her blood, holding on to the hope that one day science might catch up. That day came 37 years later. In 2018, advances in genetic genealogy finally cracked the case. The buckskin girl was identified as Marcia King, a 21-year-old from Arkansas who had been hitchhiking across the country. The revelation brought her family long-awaited closure. But it didn't solve the bigger mystery. Who killed her, and why? Even today, no one knows for sure. Her story is both haunting and hopeful, proof that even the coldest cases can find a voice again if we refuse to forget them. 9. Paula Abdul's Forgotten Crash. In the early 1990s, pop icon Paula Abdul was everywhere. Platinum records, sold-out tours, and a career that seemed unstoppable. But then she disappeared from the spotlight for years, returning later with a story that raised eyebrows across the world. She claimed she had survived a near-fatal plane crash in 1992. According to Abdul, she was flying between tour stops when one of the engines exploded mid-air. The wing caught fire, and moments later everything went black. She says she woke up in a hospital, partially paralyzed, her cervical spine crushed. Over the years, she's spoken about enduring 15 spinal surgeries and years of recovery, blaming the accident for the abrupt halt in her career. But here's where the mystery deepens. No records exist of such a crash. The National Transportation Safety Board has no file, and journalists digging through archives have never found evidence of the fiery emergency Abdul described. Even stranger, she sometimes pointed to different years when recounting the incident. So what really happened? Was there a small, unreported emergency landing? Did trauma blur her memory? Or is it possible the crash never happened the way she described? Supporters say her health struggles prove something serious occurred. Skeptics argue the story is inconsistent. Either way, the truth is lost in the haze. And the legend of Paula Abdul's forgotten crash lives on in pop culture folklore. 10. The sword that vanished. Few objects in history carry the weight of the Honjo Masamune, a legendary Japanese sword forged by the master swordsmith Masamune himself. This blade wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of power, passed down through generations of shoguns during the Edo period. By the 20th century, it had become a national treasure of Japan. But in 1945, at the end of World War II, the Honjo Masamune disappeared. As part of Japan's surrender, families were ordered to turn in all weapons. The Tokugawa family, custodians of the sword, handed it over to a police station in Tokyo. Soon after, an American officer identified only as C.I. Kun signed for it. That's the last time the sword was ever seen. What happened next is anyone's guess. Some believe the blade was melted down with thousands of other weapons. Others think it ended up as a war trophy, quietly hanging above some American fireplace, its value completely unknown to its keeper. A darker theory suggests it was stolen, the officer's name a fabrication to cover the theft. Wherever it is, the Honjo Masamune remains missing. For sword enthusiasts and historians alike, it's not just about a weapon. It's about a cultural treasure, a piece of Japan's identity, vanished in the fog of war. And somewhere out there, it might still exist. 11. The Lake Serpent of Manitoba. In the icy waters of central Canada, locals whisper about a creature called Manipogo. First reported in 1909, it's said to be a massive serpent-like animal with several humps rising above the surface and a head shaped like a horse or a sheep. Some even claim it grunts like a moose, echoing across the lake at night. The stories trace back much further than 20th century sightings. Indigenous communities had their own legends of giant water serpents inhabiting Lake Manitoba, tales that carried warnings of danger and respect for the waters. When settlers began reporting the same strange shapes and sounds, the folklore took on new life. Over the years, dozens of sightings have surfaced, fishermen swearing they saw long dark forms cutting across the water, families reporting multiple humps rising and falling in rhythm. In 1962, two men even snapped a photograph of something snake-like in the lake. To some, it was proof. To others, it was nothing more than a floating log. Skeptics point to sturgeons, massive fish that can grow over 10 feet long, or moose swimming across the lake, their heads and backs breaking the surface in a way that mimics a sea monster. Yet despite explanations, the legend of Manipogo lives on. So much so that Manitoba named a provincial park after it and hosts an annual festival in its honor. Because sometimes myths become part of the landscape. 12th, Florida's foul-smelling giant. In the swamps of southern Florida, people speak of a creature that's as terrifying to the nose as it is to the eyes, the skunk ape. Imagine Bigfoot's smaller, swamp-dwelling cousin, standing 6 to 8 feet tall, covered in shaggy hair, and trailing an odor described as rotting eggs mixed with wet dog. Not exactly the neighbor you'd want sneaking through your backyard. Reports go back to the early 1800s, when settlers and newspapers described a wild man raiding food stores and harassing fishermen. But it wasn't until the mid-20th century that sightings exploded. Hunters, hikers, even police officers claimed to see a giant ape-like figure lurking in the Everglades. Some reported glowing eyes at night. Others swore their homes were stalked. In 2000, the Sarasota Sheriff's Office received anonymous photographs, now called the Miaka skunk ape photos, showing what looked like a massive orangutan crouching among palm fronds. To believers, it was undeniable proof. To skeptics, it was a hoax staged with a person in a costume. Scientists generally dismissed the skunk ape as misidentified black bears, or even escaped exotic pets, given Florida's history with private zoos. But locals aren't so quick to laugh it off. For them, the swamp holds too many secrets, and too many eerie nights of foul odors drifting through the mangroves. Real or myth, the skunk ape has become Florida's own legend, one that still makes people glance over their shoulder on dark swamp roads. 13. A teen's final note. On Valentine's Day, 1975, a couple driving down a rural Louisiana road spotted something horrifying, the body of a teenage boy hanging from a tree. At his feet sat a sealed glass jar, and inside it was a letter, not to police, but to his parents. In the note, the boy thanked his mother and father for the advantages they'd given him, but confessed he felt like a false and empty vessel. He wrote about lifelong depression, about never becoming the person he thought he should be. He even cited the philosopher Emile Durkheim's writings on suicide, showing not only his despair, but also a sharp, intellectual bent. In a haunting postscript, he begged authorities not to identify him. Do not deprive them of the hope that their missing son will return. Simply cremate me as John Doe. Despite fingerprints, dental checks, and hundreds of families coming forward, his identity was never found. He was buried in an unmarked grave, remembered only as the Plaquemines Parish John Doe. Decades later, amateur sleuths have tried to link him to other missing boys from that era. But the truth is, he could have been anyone. A runaway, a troubled student, a son too burdened by expectations. His final wish, to remain nameless, has been honored, and in that silence lies one of the saddest mysteries of all. 14. Vanished in plain sight. On December 13th, 2020, 21-year-old Jason Landry left his college apartment in San Marcos, Texas, to drive home for the holidays. The trip should have been simple, just a few hours to his parents' house near Houston. But Jason never made it. Sometime around midnight, his car was found wrecked on a remote gravel road called Salt Flat Road. The Nissan Altima had veered off, lights still on, keys in the ignition. His phone, wallet, backpack, and even his clothes were scattered outside, as if dropped mid-step. But Jason himself was nowhere to be seen. Search dogs picked up his scent and followed it for about a quarter mile down the road, until it abruptly stopped. No footprints, no blood trail, no sign of where he'd gone. Theories spun quickly. Did Jason get disoriented after the crash and wander into the night, possibly succumbing to hypothermia? Did he suffer a head injury that made him act irrationally? Or was he picked up by someone, explaining the sudden end of his scent trail? Despite massive searches, drones, and investigators combing the countryside, no trace of Jason has ever surfaced. Not a shoe, not a bone, nothing. It's as though he stepped out of his car and simply disappeared. Some mysteries feel designed to taunt us. Jason's case is one of them, vanishing not in the wilderness of another country, but on a quiet Texas back road just miles from home. 15. A predator in Vegas. Las Vegas in the 1980s was a city of neon and glamour, but for some women, it became the backdrop to a deadly pattern. At the center was a man named Robert Weeks, a charming but controlling boyfriend with a history darker than anyone realized. In October 1980, 47-year-old Cynthia Jabber vanished after telling friends she planned to end her relationship with Weeks. Her car was found abandoned at Caesar's Palace. She left behind tens of thousands in investments. Investigators suspected foul play immediately, but Weeks claimed she had simply moved on. Then he fled the country. Years later, another woman connected to Weeks, Carol Riley, also disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Digging deeper, detectives uncovered even more. His ex-wife had vanished back in the late 60s, and a business associate had disappeared after an argument in the 70s. Every case had the same signature: no body, an abandoned car, and Robert Weeks walking away untouched. It wasn't until 1987 that he was finally arrested and brought to trial. Diaries revealed his obsession, even rage, over women who tried to leave him. In a landmark conviction, Weeks was found guilty of 2 murders, despite no bodies ever being recovered. For decades, families never got the closure of remains. Weeks took those secrets to his grave. But his story stands as proof. Sometimes the most dangerous predator doesn't stalk the streets. He's the man waiting at home. 16. Lost in Oklahoma. On a chilly March morning in 1998, 39-year-old Lenny Dirksen stepped outside his Oklahoma farmhouse to meet a stranger in a white pickup truck. The man claimed he wanted to see one of Lenny's stud horses. Lenny, a hard-working dairyman, told his teenage son Jared that he'd be back later that afternoon. He never returned. The stranger's truck, a white Ford F-150 with New Mexico plates and a yellow tag, was the last thing Jared saw as his father drove away. A waitress later claimed she saw Lenny at a diner with a man matching the description, but even she admitted something seemed off. The stranger did all the talking, while Lenny just stared into his coffee. After that, the trail went cold. Theories abound. Some believe Lenny was targeted, lured away under the pretense of selling a horse, then killed. Others think he may have met with an accident far from home. Months later, an anonymous caller even insisted Lenny was alive in a Texas bar. But by the time police arrived, both the caller and the supposed Lenny had vanished. For Jared, who was just 16, the loss was more than a mystery. It was a stolen life. Did a simple conversation about horses mask something far more sinister? Or did Lenny, overwhelmed by divorce and debt, walk away from it all? Either way, one truth remains: he was never seen again. 17. A student's double life. In the summer of 1998, Marcus Rutledge, a Tennessee State University student, vanished without explanation. At first, his friends and family thought it was just a misunderstanding. But when they checked his apartment, they found his dog locked in the bathroom, his daily routines interrupted, and his car missing. Something wasn't right. 3 weeks later, his car was located at an apartment complex in Nashville. Inside was a handgun, something his family swore he never owned. No blood, no signs of struggle, just an eerie absence. Police quietly suspected foul play from the beginning. But the story took a darker turn when detectives uncovered secrets Marcus had kept hidden. He wasn't actually enrolled in classes anymore, and to make ends meet, he'd started dealing small amounts of drugs, a risky side hustle that had already led to confrontations. As if that wasn't enough, just months later his best friend and former roommate, Ethan Gibbs, was murdered in his home. For investigators, the link was too suspicious to ignore. Were the two men targeted because of their dealings? Was it a warning? It would take over 20 years before Marcus's remains were identified. In 2010, a skull was discovered near Nashville, and in 2023, DNA finally confirmed it was his. Yet even with a name in a grave, the bigger questions remain. Who killed him? And how deep did his double life really go? 18. The torture device that never was. If you've ever wandered through a medieval museum or cracked open a history book, you've probably seen it. The Iron Maiden, a coffin-shaped cage lined with spikes, supposedly used to pierce victims from every angle. It's one of the most infamous torture devices ever imagined. But here's the catch. It may never have existed at all. There are no medieval records of the Iron Maiden being used. None. The earliest mentions appear centuries later, in the 18th and 19th centuries, when fascination with dark medieval cruelty was at its peak. Showmen and antiquarians began cobbling together spiked coffins from unrelated artifacts, passing them off as authentic torture chambers to horrify paying crowds. The most famous example, the so-called Iron Maiden of Nuremberg, was built around 1800. It looked terrifying, sure, but it wasn't medieval. It was a theatrical prop for a fascinated, thrill-seeking public. And yet, the myth stuck. Generations grew up believing this was the brutal face of medieval justice. In reality, the Middle Ages had plenty of real torture devices, racks, wheels, and fires. But the Iron Maiden was more of a marketing invention than a weapon of terror. Strangely though, Saddam Hussein's son Uday was rumored to have used a spiked coffin device on prisoners in the late 20th century. Not history reborn, but horror reinvented. So maybe the Iron Maiden never haunted medieval dungeons. But sometimes myths create monsters of their own. 19. The case of the Belgian mother. In Belgium, one of the most haunting cold cases resurfaced in 2025, the story of Heidi de Schepper, a young mother of 3 who vanished in 2010. What makes her disappearance chilling isn't just the mystery itself, but the silence that surrounded it for nearly 14 years. Heidi's life had been difficult from the start. She grew up in foster care, cut ties with her biological family, and entered a deeply troubling relationship with a much older man, a man who had once been her foster father. To outsiders, the couple lived quietly with their children, but neighbors described them as isolated, almost hidden from the community. Then, one summer day, Heidi was gone. No missing person report, no police file, nothing. Her partner simply told social services she had left, and the government eventually removed her from official records. It was as though she had been erased. It wasn't until 2023, when school officials flagged her unexplained absence as a mother, that the case was reopened. Police questioned her former partner, now the prime suspect, but he claimed Heidi walked away because of drug problems. Yet doubts remain. Why would a devoted mother abandon her children? Why would no one, not even her partner, sound the alarm? The mystery lingers, fueled by suspicion that Heidi's disappearance was no accident, but a secret someone wanted buried. 20. Mystery of the flight attendant. On the morning of January 1st, 2021, the body of Christine Daquera, a 23-year-old flight attendant, was found in a hotel bathtub in Makati, Philippines. What should have been a joyful New Year's celebration turned into one of the most controversial cases the country had seen in years. Christine had been out with friends and colleagues, ringing in the new year at the City Garden Grand Hotel. Hours later, she was gone. Early reports from police pointed to foul play. Bruises, scratches, and lacerations on her body led investigators to suggest she had been assaulted. 11 men were quickly named as suspects, and the case was declared solved almost overnight. But then the autopsy results flipped the story upside down. The official cause of death? A ruptured aortic aneurysm, a sudden natural medical event. According to the report, Christine hadn't been attacked. She had suffered an unexpected medical collapse. Still, her family and much of the public didn't buy it. How could someone so young and healthy die this way? And what about the marks on her body? Critics accused police of mishandling evidence, embalming her body before crucial tests could be done, rushing to judgment and tainting the case from the start. To this day, Christine's death remains suspended between science and suspicion. Was it truly a medical tragedy, or was the truth buried beneath a flawed investigation? 21st. Secrets in the swamp. Florida's Everglades are a place of silence and mystery, vast swaths of swamp where shadows move just out of sight, and for decades, locals have sworn one of those shadows belongs to the skunk ape, a foul-smelling, ape-like creature said to haunt the wetlands. The legend isn't new. Indigenous tales spoke of hairy, human-like beings roaming the swamps long before Florida was settled. But in the 20th century, sightings exploded. Hunters claimed the creature stalked their camps. Police officers reported being followed through orange groves. One fire chief in the late 90s even swore he saw a massive figure dart across the road, snapping a quick photograph that still circulates among believers today. The most famous evidence came in 2000, when the Sarasota Sheriff's Office received anonymous photos of a creature peering through backyard palmettos, its fanged mouth caught in the flash of a camera. The images, now known as the Miaka skunk ape photos, remain some of the most debated cryptid snapshots in America. Skeptics, of course, have their explanations: black bears walking upright, orangutans or apes escaped from private collections, or simple hoaxes. But for every dismissal, there's another late-night encounter whispered by those who swear they've smelled its rank odor or seen its hulking frame. Real or imagined, the skunk ape has earned its place in Florida folklore, a swamp-born cousin of Bigfoot, carrying with it the reek of mystery. 22. The case of the missing samurai sword. Among Japan's countless treasures, few carried the symbolic weight of the Honjo Masamune, a blade forged by the legendary swordsmith Masamune in the 13th century. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a badge of power, passed from shogun to shogun during the Edo period. By the 20th century, it was officially recognized as a national treasure. But in the aftermath of World War II, this priceless artifact vanished. In 1945, as part of Japan's surrender, citizens were ordered to turn in their weapons. The Tokugawa family, custodians of the Honjo Masamune, handed it over to police in Tokyo. Just weeks later, the sword was signed out by an American officer identified only as C.I. Kun. And then, nothing. No trace, no record, no return. Theories abound. Some believe the sword was melted down with countless other surrendered weapons, destroyed before anyone realized its value. Others think it was quietly taken home as a war trophy, passed down through a family in the United States, its owners unaware they're holding a blade worth millions. Still others suspect theft, with C.I. Kun possibly being a fabricated name. Wherever it is, the Honjo Masamune remains one of history's greatest missing treasures. For Japan, it's more than a lost sword. It's a missing piece of identity, vanished in the fog of war. 23rd, Mystery of the White Death. Unlike ancient folklore passed down through centuries, the legend of the White Death is a modern creation, born on internet forums in the early 2000s. But that hasn't stopped it from becoming one of the creepiest digital age myths. The story goes like this. Once you hear about the White Death, you're marked. A pale, hollow-eyed girl will stalk you wherever you go, not to simply kill you, but to erase you. She doesn't just end lives. She wipes out entire existences. Photographs, records, even memories of you are said to vanish, as if you never walked the earth at all. It's a chilling twist on an old horror theme, the curse of forbidden knowledge. Simply knowing about her, the legend warns, is enough to seal your fate, and once you're aware, there's no escape. Skeptics, of course, dismiss the story as just another creepypasta, a campfire tale for the internet age, in the same family as Slender Man or The Rake. But that's exactly what makes it work. The White Death plays on the unique anxieties of our time, the way stories spread uncontrollably online, the way ideas burrow into our minds and can't be forgotten. Is she real? Almost certainly not. But the next time you're alone at night, scrolling the internet, and the room goes suddenly quiet, you might find yourself listening just a little too closely. 24th, Pyramid Power. Since the dawn of civilization, pyramids have inspired awe, colossal structures that seem almost otherworldly in their precision. But in the 20th century, a strange belief took hold, that pyramids weren't just tombs or monuments, but powerful energy machines. The idea began with a Frenchman named Antoine Bovis in the 1930s. While visiting the Great Pyramid of Giza, he claimed he noticed that small animals inside seemed preserved rather than decayed. Convinced the pyramid's shape created a mysterious energy field, he went home and built scale models, and insisted they could sharpen razor blades, mummify food, and even improve health. By the 1970s, the theory had gone global. Books like Pyramid Power by Patrick Flanagan pushed the concept into New Age culture. People meditated under cardboard pyramids, built backyard replicas, and swore they felt more focused, more alive. Some claimed plants grew faster. Others said food stayed fresh longer. Scientists weren't convinced. Controlled experiments consistently showed no measurable pyramid energy. Improvements people reported were chalked up to placebo effects, the power of belief, not geometry. Still, the fascination endured. Even today, you'll find pyramid-shaped products marketed for healing, meditation, and even spiritual charging. Do they work? Evidence says no. But like the structures themselves, the myth of pyramid power refuses to crumble, because sometimes mystery doesn't need proof. It only needs wonder. 25. The final mystery. Every story we've explored, from vanished swords to swamp-dwelling beasts, carries the same thread, the unknown. Humanity has always lived with mysteries, and perhaps we always will. But that's what makes them so powerful. They remind us that not everything has an answer, not every case a neat conclusion. Think about it. A young man disappears on a Texas backroad. A priceless sword vanishes into history. A legendary monster surfaces in icy Canadian waters. Some of these mysteries will one day be solved through science, technology, or persistence. Others may remain forever unsolved, lingering in the space between fact and folklore. But maybe that's the point. Mystery is what keeps us searching, asking, pushing to understand. It's what makes history more than dates and names. It makes it alive, filled with echoes that demand we listen. So as you head into the rest of your day or night, remember, not all questions need answers to shape us. Sometimes the questions themselves are enough. And who knows, maybe the next great mystery isn't one from the past, but one you'll stumble upon tomorrow.